Good morning, good evening. I welcome you all for the second day of our webinar, Shrimp Breeding Strategies for Success. We had a wonderful first day. We got to learn quite a few things from the speakers on the first day. And today is Hawaiian Day. All the speakers are from Hawaii. And today happens to be May 10th, I think, the National Shrimp Day in USA. I mean, so I wish you a happy shrimp day today. Hope you are going to consume more shrimps. I wish US to consume more shrimps and help the industry thrive. I mean, we are the #1 exporters to US, and we wish the habit to thrive. I mean, this is your favorite seafood. We wish you to eat more and help the industry thrive everywhere. And yesterday we got to discuss a whole lot of things about the breeding per se and the environment, how the farmers can improve their culture practices, how hatcheries could help to harness the potential of the animals. So, I mean, we will have a similar kind of discussion today also. But today's session is more important in the sense that, we have the two major suppliers to India today as speakers. We have Steve RC from Kona Bay and Harris Wright, the geneticist from SIS. These two companies put together, they're giving about, 80 to 90% of the stocks to India. And we also have Oscar Hennings. And to get started, we have, Jim Wyban. The man who started all this, he's the guy who has done the seminal work, Today, the industry is in this kind of a situation because of the work, what he has done. He is a great scientist. Apart from that, he's, very good entrepreneur as well. See, he was the principal investigator when Oceanic Institute started a, breeding program somewhere in 1990s. I mean, basically they started to help the US shrimp farming industry. And after they started using these domesticated stocks, the production of US has doubled. He got a clue from that, Jim Wyban. He could see the potential of that business, and he requested OI to go global, but Oceanic Institute didn't agree for that because it's there on their mandate. Then he came out. I mean, that's the beauty of entrepreneurship of Jim Wyban. He came out of the company and started a breeding company. Then the whole thing started, exponentially the industry grew. I mean, had they not started that breeding program, I'm not really sure where we would have been, So that's a great seminal work, what he has done. And, he showed his entrepreneurship abilities as well by coming out of OI to start a commercial breeding program and supply broodstock all over the world. Then others followed suit, but he was the one who has set an example. So, I mean, it's a great honor and privilege to have you here, Jim Wyban, as a keynote speaker for the second day. And I love your passion. Even now, though you're not part of it, you were there for the mock run at 2 o'clock in the night. And the second day, you were there to hear to all the presentations, and now here you are. I mean, looking at you, I mean, I think, you have very good genes. But, even the environment, discrepancy or whatever you call, that also you're maintaining it. I mean, you see to that it is not disturbing your genes, as they say, P is equal to G plus E. You have good genes, but you swim every day, you don't smoke, you don't drink, and you sleep well. So that you are keeping it as constant, So, and you're able to, see your genetic potential, I mean, the phenotype is your health, P is equal to G plus U. So you're a great example, for the industry, I mean, we need to work on the environment. I mean, that is the husbandry at the hatcheries and the farms and the biosecurity. And the G is the genotypic value, which these breeders have to work on. Then we're going to have good phenotypic value, With this, I'll stop and invite Jim Wyban. Jim, it's all yours, Jim.
Okay, thank you so much, Ravi, for that lovely introduction. And if I go, I'll just go right to my slideshow here. There we go. Thank you. Okay, that's great. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about shrimp breeding, the status and outlook for the industry. And again, thanks to the organizers for inviting me here. Let's see, what's the deal? I need to, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. I want to get that out of the way. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the shrimp farming situation is that aquaculture is the world's fastest growing agriculture sector. And in aquaculture, shrimp farming is the most valuable aquaculture sector. Annual production in 2021 was about 5 million metric tons, worth about $40 billion farm gate value. P. vannamei emerged as the species of choice for shrimp farming and represents more than 85% of the total crop globally. And that came about with the introduction of SPF vannamei into Asia in the early 2000s. Most of the Asian shrimp production, which still dominates the world, results from the imported SPF broodstock supplied by these multinational shrimp breeding companies that are talking here in your seminar. So here's this graphic shows the global production of the shrimp industry. The green bars are the annual total production for the world in shrimp farming. And when we first introduced SPF vannamei to Asia was around 2000, the global production was around 1 metric ton, 1 metric ton, right? And so then vannamei got into Asia and it got adopted, and look at the growth rate, exponential growth, amazingly up to about 4 million metric tons. And in 2021, I don't have it on this graph, but it's even higher. It's about 4.5 million metric tons. So phenomenal growth as a result of the introduction and adoption of SPF vannamei in Asia. The percentage of the total world shrimp farming production that is due to domesticated vannamei are these gold dots, and you can see we're up above 80%. So what are the market values for the white shrimp in the global situation? As I mentioned, shrimp production is somewhere around 5 million metric tons with a farm gate value of about $30 billion. That's a lot of money. The PL required for that industry are about 450 billion PLs. That's a lot of counting, and they're worth $1.6 billion. So that's not a trivial industry at all, the hatchery industry. Broodstock, to make all that shrimp, is about 1.5 million pairs of broodstock, and that in the commercial market is worth about $200 million. So all of these are big numbers, and the shrimp industry is really a big industry at this point. Sorry. So what's the India situation? Traditionally, India has farmed the black tiger P. monodon, and then with the introduction of SPF vannamei in about 2009, India has been propelled to become a leading exporter of farm shrimp, more than 800,000 metric tons worth over $4.8 billion in 2021. More than 90% of that production was from vannamei. Keep in mind, India's SPF vannamei germplasm, that's the genetic basket for all the shrimp in India, is all derived from imported SPF broodstock from international breeding companies that the broodstock passed through the aquatic quarantine in Chennai. And this system in India is unique And I think it has contributed to India's very rapid growth over the last few years. And I will talk more about that. Currently in India, there's a couple of broodstock multiplication centers that are producing SPF broodstock. The government had a BMC. It's not running right now, but that's been an important contribution to the industry. And there may be more of that to come. Kona Bay has intentions of building a BMC, and I'm sure Stevie will talk about that. Okay, here's the India shrimp farming industry production year by year, and it shows both the Vaname in the white bars and the monodon in the yellow bars year by year. And you can see way back in 2004, the monodon was somewhere like 130, 140,000 tons, and went up a little bit for a couple of years, and then it started to sink down to about 100,000 tons at the time of the introduction of Vaname. They actually came in 2008, but it was a insignificant amount production. 2009, the Vaname started to produce nicely, and it's been almost exponential growth all the way up to 2021, where it's over 800,000 tons. So quite impressive. And monodon, actually, even though there's lots of interest in monodon, the numbers are actually going down rather than up. And we can talk about that some. So how did you get there? All of the Vaname production comes from imported broodstock. And this graphic illustrates that, illustrates the broodstock animals. And we see that in a pretty steady increase in the broodstock coming into India year by year. And in 2021, the number is about 280,000 pieces. And that's quite a bit of broodstock. And so that's where a lot of the companies are paying very close attention to what's happening in India. Sorry, I've got a new mouse and it's strange. Broodstock. Okay, so here's the broodstock importers for 2021, the market share distribution, and the two big ones, as mentioned by Ravi in the intro, are SIS and Kona Bay, producing introducing or selling over 90% of the broodstock supply to India in 2021. The other four groups are, combined make up about 10%. Here's the PL production by year for the India industry, and tremendous growth. I know that it represents a great deal of effort on the part of the hatchery people. When you start throwing around numbers of billions of post larvae, that represents a lot of work. It takes a lot to produce 1 billion post larvae. And in 2021, the India industry hatchery folks produced 80 billion PL. That's just an incredible amount of, I don't think any of us could count that much. Okay. So when you have all these numbers, production, imported broodstock, and PL production, you can start to use those numbers to calculate some efficiencies for the industry. And that's what this graphic is done. And I'm going to take a little time here to explain how these were generated so that we all understand it, because I think these are really important numbers. The first one is the green bar, and that's PLs per broodstock. And here you started out in the in 2009, and it comes across. And then I think everybody kept getting better at their production, and that's the broodstock are getting better, the hatchery operators are getting better, the larval feeds are getting better. And look at between 2014 and 2019, you went from a number of about 12 up to about 32 or something. So almost tripled in terms of the efficiency of PL produced per broodstock, per imported broodstock. So that's a fantastic thing. In this graphic, you see a little bit of a decline in 2020 and 2021 for these ratios. And I would say those are kind of outliers because of the pandemic and supply chain disruption, staffing problems, supplies, everything was messed up because of the pandemic. So those numbers are kind of have to have an asterisk by them. I would say that the 2019 number, though, represents a very big success for the hatchery industry. You go from up this tons per million okay, that's the red line. And this started out close to 20 on this scale, and about 40%. There are factors that can ratio that are independent of the quality of the PL or the quality of the farming, and that is the size of animals that are being harvested. If it's the same number of shrimp grown to a larger size, you're getting more metric tons per million PLs, right? In reverse, if you are producing smaller shrimp, then the metric tons per million PLs is going to be a lower number. And I believe a big part of this declining metric tons per million PLs is due to the fact that a lot of farmers are harvesting at smaller sizes in order to avoid catastrophic disease losses. May explain that number. Metric tons per imported broodstock. Again, this one is the yellow bar, started at a pretty high number, 25. It came down some. It was trending downward up till about 2016. And then I don't know exactly what happened, but wow, it really took off then over the next few years, 2016 up to 2019, really got a big boost in terms of the tons of shrimp per imported broodstock. And again, I'll leave the 2020 and 2021 data out of this. So one of the developments that's very interesting to me in the shrimp breeding industry is that all of the broodstock companies, or most of the broodstock companies, have diversified their products. And that's illustrated in this table where I've listed some of the products that are currently available from the different breeding company suppliers. The first, and we can divide it into basically three characteristics. One group are the fast growth animals that are available. And then there's something that the breeders are calling a balance, which is probably combined selection for both resilience or survival in ponds or something like that, combined with their growth rates. So that's the middle column. And then the last column, this one is the tolerance. And those are the animals that have been subjected to breeding for resistance to some of the diseases like white spot, EMS, or just pond survival. There's a lot of different ways to do this, to breed animals for tolerance, but that seems to be a pretty popular scenario. From my perspective, when a customer of yours is looking at all of these options, how do they make their choices? I would recommend that you look at the quality of the farmer. That is this guy a really good farmer? And does he have his biosecurity methods well in hand? If that's the case, he's a very farmer and he has all his biosecurity and he's not afraid of risk, then those folks are going to be looking at the fast growth animals because they know how to manage their farm. And the faster the animals grow, the quicker they get to a crop, the less risk of disease and so forth, or they can grow a bigger animal that has more value. So that's the very risk tolerant, high quality farmers are going to be interested in the fast growth. In contrast, those farmers which are a little more, let's say, primitive in their methods, in their husbandry technique, in their knowledge of biosecurity, those guys need some help. And I think that the tolerance stocks that are now available from the breeding companies can help those guys because they give them some defense against these very difficult diseases they're facing. And those folks also, if they have risk aversion, they don't like risk, they don't want to risk their money, then they should be selecting the tolerant animals. And you can see there's a lot of products that are in the tolerant column. And then of course, those folks that are kind of a little bit risk tolerant and want to make money and all that, then they have the options there in the middle. So that would be my 2 cents on the how do you select these products and so forth. Okay, so BMCs in India, this is a very important subject for all of the people in this situation because the complexity of importing all of the SPF broodstock through the quarantine facility in Chennai comes with quite high costs. The broodstock animals are already quite expensive, and then you layer on top of it this requirement to pass them through the quarantine to assure the biosecurity for the industry means that they come with a very high cost. And so the idea of the BMCs in India, this is a way that you can get the broodstock produced closer to home and avoid some of those import risks and import expenses. At this point, this is my understanding, is that both SPD and Global Gen have animals growing in their BMCs, and that combined, they might produce 100,000 animals this year. Another BMC, the first one that was developed in India was developed by the government, the RGCA BMC. That was producing Vaname broodstock using post larvae supplied by Oceanic Institute. It's my understanding that right now that facility is not in operation. And I understand that there's a conversation within RGCA to possibly convert that facility into a black tiger P monodon BMC to start producing SPF monodon broodstock in India. That's a very interesting situation. And then the third point about BMCs in India, Kona Bay has announced their intention to develop a BMC in India. And I'm sure Steve will talk more about that. And it's interesting because they've already developed their first BMC in Indonesia, and that facility has done very well. And has worked out well for both for Kona Bay and for the Indonesia shrimp industry. So the BMC initiative is fantastic. I think it should continue and maybe expand. So then what do we say about the broodstock and breeding trends that we've seen? First of all, shrimp breeding is advancing very rapidly. All of the companies are starting to introduce DNA technology into their breeding, which is going to take their power to breed these animals up to even higher levels. I would say from my experience, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I would say that the using best methods, the breeders can probably expect to improve shrimp performance in whatever character they're breeding for by something like up to 10% per generation. You know, you may hear other people talk about, oh, 25% gain and blah, blah, blah. I think on average, if they can improve their animals 10% per generation, they're doing a fantastic job. The breeding companies, as I showed in the last slide, have now developed multiple product lines that include both resistant or tolerant stocks. Those sometimes are called SPR or SPT. And so I think that's a really interesting development, and I think it helps the industry deal with risk in a big way, that now animals carrying genetic resistance to some of the most difficult diseases gives the farmers a little bit of protection from those diseases. And those might include white spot resistant or EMS tolerant, and all the way up to some super growth lines. I would say, you know, I've been thinking about this seminar and my friends in India, and what do they do in this situation? What can I tell you that could be useful or helpful? And that's the point I want to make right here is I think that it would be very interesting if the shrimp industry in India, maybe the Hatchery Association, organized something called the Shrimp Breeders Challenge. And what I would suggest that would be is that the various suppliers of shrimp PLs or the breeding stocks, someone who coordinates this gets samples, representative samples from all the different breeders, and they're grown under standardized conditions. And then the farmers actually have real world demonstration of how the various stocks perform under the industry conditions. I would say if you're more curious about this, you know, look at the F3 competition that Kevin Fitzsimmons is doing in the feed industry. It's a very interesting innovation driving approach to how do you get the industry more innovative and develop new products. Keep in mind that shrimp breeding is fantastic, but it doesn't create a silver bullet. That is, the shrimp have great potential, but they still are only can perform as well as the system that you put them into. And those are very real biological constraints that people need to work on. And finally, will there be more BMCs? I suspect so, but you know, let's just leave it there. Okay, what's the impact of India's adoption of SPF white shrimp? In 2008, total production was 110,000 tons. 2021, 13 years later, it's 820,000 tons. Fantastic. And the value of that industry went from 575 to $4.2 billion. That's an 8-fold increase. The compound annual growth rate of that industry between these 2 years is at 18%. And believe me, 18% for a CAGR number is unheard of in biological systems. So everybody that farms shrimp in India should be very, very proud of what you guys have achieved. And I did a back of the envelope calculation of what the cumulative added value of the Vaname introduction to India has been since 2008. And I get a number around $45 billion cumulative. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Hawaii because that's what I know best. And these are the Hawaii broodstock export numbers by year. And you can see that the industry kind of peaked in 2015. That was a great year. They got up to 800,000. It's come down considerably over that time. 2020, in the midst of the COVID, was the worst year since about 2012. But look at 2021, we got a bump back up. We're up to almost 500,000 pieces. So the industry is resilient, and we'll continue to ship broodstock out of Hawaii. It's a very, very nice industry for Hawaii. So let's look a little bit about who's buying these shrimp broodstock from Hawaii. These are the 4 big countries that buy broodstock: India, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia. They each have their own pattern. So going from the red bar to the purple bar, you can see those are by year. India, it went up rapidly, fell off a little bit, but in 2021, India's imports from Hawaii are up a little bit. And the number is actually 140,000 pieces, which is about exactly half of India's imports came from Hawaii. Vietnam's been steady. China was huge in the beginning, fell almost to nothing in 2018-19. And now this past year, the purple bar, China went way back up. They're almost same as India. Okay, sorry, going the wrong way. Okay, here's a little commercial. I'm engaged in organizing a conference that's going to be here in Hawaii called the Tropical AgTech Conference. And we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff relating to AgTech. You know, this is the digitization of agriculture. But because of my interest in shrimp breeding, we're including a breeding section in here, not specifically on shrimp, but we will have a breeding session in the AgTech thing. I have the website tropagtech.com listed there. So check it out if you're interested in all the new stuff happening in AgTech. That'll be in June of this year, so just a month away. Check it out. And it's also going to be done virtual, so you can watch it from India. Now we get to the breeding. So all of these companies now, because they're SPF companies, they have to follow an SPF breeding model. That is, they only use SPF stocks. It's the vast majority of the broodstock to Asia. To date, mostly the SPF breeding programs have focused on, excuse me?
5 more minutes for you.
Yes, sir. Focused on breeding for fast growth because the intensive systems in Asia require that. A major caveat of this SPF breeding model is germplasm limitations. There's just not enough SPF germplasm around to do all of the kinds of breeding we need to do, but it's very, very expensive and high risk bringing in new animals. And of course, the SPF breeding requires biosecure systems. The workhorse of breeding to date has been family-based selection. And this is a graph from my days at High Health Aquaculture. And what we saw using family-based breeding was like a stair step of improvement. Each bar is a generation. And we just, as we selected these animals on a family-based selection, they got better and better, so that by generation 5, we were at 90% survival in the challenge. So that really is a very effective technique. Of course, since then, new DNA technologies have emerged, and these are fantastic. And you're going to hear about these from some of the other speakers. But basically, genomic selection is the grand poobah of breeding. And this slide kind of illustrates the thinking. These are the various techniques in breeding, going from the simplest and least expensive, mass selection, all the way up to the most complex, most expensive, most powerful is genomic selection. And here in between, we have family selections. But all of these, as we go up this ladder, you're getting more and more complexity. You're getting more and more expensive to do, but the power of those breeding techniques are increasing too. I'm going to skip that. CRISPR is a very interesting situation. And I did find a reference that the Roslin Institute has started a project to breed white spot resistant shrimp using CRISPR technology. That's going to be fantastic. Hatchery technique. I recommend you guys really upgrade your biosecurity methods. That's what you need to continue to be successful using SPF broodstock. You need to produce SPF PLs from those broodstock, and it's biosecurity is the key. Monodon, you know, you guys know way more about monodon than I do, but there's a resurgence in interest in monodon in India. And it's my understanding that the RGCA is now talking about converting their BMC into a tiger monodon facility. And Moana, another Hawaii company that breeds monodon, is in partnership and planning to build a BMC in India as we speak. And the black bars here are the India results. You can the monodon results, and you can see it's been slowly going down while the Vaname is going up. Comparative, Vaname still far outperforms monodon economically, crop value twice as much. These are the breeding companies that can supply monodon. You have CP Foods. There is a little bit of an outlier in that they're not able to ship from Thailand to India, but maybe they'll get some monodon down in their Florida facility and be able to supply you guys. So here's my summary. The status: India's switch to white shrimp increased production and value 8-fold and added $35 billion to the value of the industry. Selective breeding for fast growth, high survival, disease resistance continues to improve the shrimp in the industry. Family-based phenotypic selection and indexing have been the most efficient methods, but now new molecular techniques are becoming ever more important, and they are very powerful. So we see product diversification from the breeders. You see all the different product lines that they're offering you. That's a great development. Because of that, I recommend that the industry consider organizing a breeders' challenge so you can compare all those various stocks under standardized conditions, and then you really have real world data on what it all means. And then to continue to grow the industry, the hatcheries must redouble their biosecurity efforts because you want to produce top quality, disease-free PL. Okay. And finally, the addition of more BMCs in the country can improve the industry's efficiency while continuing to benefit from the advancing breeding programs of these international breeding companies. Thank you very much.
That was a fantastic talk, Jim. I mean, the point what I liked about your talk is the breeders' challenge test in India. I mean, we can make these guys compete and raise the bar, you know. I mean, we'll take a cue from that. Definitely we'll work on that. Probably we'll take your help as well while conducting the challenge test. I mean, that would keep all our suppliers on their toes, you know. I mean,
I think so.
And we are going to get benefited. The industry is going to get benefited. I mean, definitely we would like to take that advice. And apart from that, I mean, you have talked about the road ahead, you know, what these guys are doing and what they can do to further improve and all that. Definitely, I mean, we need improvement. We need continuous improvement. I mean, it's like it's like a continuum of improvement, you know, and they've been progressing in that continuum. They need to further progress to help our industry, and in turn, they help themselves as well, you know. So, I mean, that's exactly the reason why we are conducting this, and that should be the endeavor of the entire breeding fraternity, you know. And actually, this program is organized by AISHA, All India Shrimp Hatchery Association. We have about 550 hatcheries or so. All the hatcheries which are in operation are part of this AISHA, All India Shrimp Hatchery Association. We have about 5 chapters. I mean, we have a chapter in Chennai, that's Tamil Nadu chapter. We have about 80 to 100 hatcheries. Then as you come, as you go up north, we have Nellore. There we have about 80, 90 hatcheries. There we have a chapter. Then we have Ongole and Bapatla. There also we have a chapter. You know, we have about 70 hatcheries. Then Kakinada, where we have about 200 hatcheries, you know. I mean, close to 50% of the hatcheries are located in Kakinada, and they're all operational, and they produce good volumes as well. At least 50 to 60% of the seed that's produced in the country comes from Kakinada, and we have a very active association there, active chapter. Then we have hatcheries in Vizag, where I'm talking from. I'm sitting in Vizag. We have hatcheries in Vizag, and up north of Vizag in Srikakulam and Vijayanagaram, we have about 70, 80 hatcheries here. All put together, we have hatcheries somewhere in between 550 and 600. And as an association, we thought, there is a need to engage the broodstock suppliers, as we are facing tough time. I mean, as we are going through a tough time, we don't expect the industry to do all that well this year, like what we have done last year. Last year, our production figure was close to about 900,000 tons, we did pretty well in terms of numbers, but there were no profits. As I told yesterday, we played a zero-sum game or a negative-sum game because of varied reasons. And diseases is also a major issue. This is bringing down the efficiencies and the success rate. So we need to work definitely on the G aspect of the equation. P is equal to G plus E. Definitely, we will work on E also. And what we need to do on the E part also, breeders have to tell us, and this can be done if you have a communication going on a continuous basis. That communication channel should be a bit more open, and it should be a top-down approach as well as bottoms-up approach. The information should come from the farmers to the hatcheries and go up to the breeders, so they know what to do, what is happening on the ground. Likewise, what we need to do with the broodstock also, we need to understand. See, some of the lines, if you look at, they eat more feed, they consume more feed. Probably they require high nutrition feed in the farm also. So the feeds have to be custom made, so much more of close interaction is very much required. That's what I request from the suppliers, and hopefully, at the end of the webinar, we'll come to have better understanding of each other's problems. We also know that breeding companies are doing a lot. It is definitely coming of age, and